if we take. Great. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining Sarah and I today. The two-part series on building stronger communities. So this is a let's talk, let's listen. We hope it's less of us talking and more of us listening. So today we'll be discussing what we think we can do to help our communities to become stronger and more resilient, thinking about what is working well, what the opportunities are, and how GCF can help as a funder. So here's a couple of the housekeeping pieces which most of us are familiar with. And if we move on to the next slide. So a little tiny introduction from me, but importantly, the overview of why we're holding this meeting, an update on the cost of living crisis appeal, and a summary of the previous Let's Talk. We thought we'd just summarise some of the notes coming through and the themes coming through from last time to bring that thread into this meeting. Building stronger communities. This is an opportunity for attendees to talk about how we could help communities to develop their strengths, what is already working really well, what could be improved, what the opportunities are for collaboration, and how we can help as funders. So we've drafted some discussion questions. We really encourage you to use the chat box. We download the chat box. If you don't feel you want to verbally contribute, please do keep chatting away in the chat box and we'll pick things up. The amount of people that said, Talitha, the event was really good, but the most exciting bit was meeting someone in the chat box, and we're now working in partnership together. So lots happens in that chat box, so do use that. And then we'll finish up with some final points and next steps. Moving on. Lovely. So why are we holding this meeting? We want to be a transparent and open funder. So this is about discussing the cost of living crisis appeal and the funding available and how that programme is going to work. So with every new programme, we like to open it up for discussion. And if there's any direct feedback, we can take that and we can discuss it. So really helpful for us to have this forum. Our research. So research is hugely important for us because it directs the work we do. So it feeds into our overall priorities, strategy and business planning, as well as our grant making. For example, last year's research supporting the solutions helped us, back a slide, helped us identify gaps in our work and highlighted some key areas that we could support organisations in Gloucestershire. One of the key questions asked in our previous research was, how can we support you in ways other than funding? And out of 100 respondents, the top survey response at 56% was the request for GCF to help the sector with opportunities to work more collaboratively and to form partnerships. Therefore, events like these are really important to bring people together and provide opportunities to share. There have been some wonderful partnerships formed in the chat box, as previously mentioned. We also asked in the same question, the response, 25% of respondents were charity leaders, and they asked for supported mentoring, and we launched what's called the Invest programme. So out of research, we've had some really key things that came out in terms of what was needed from us. And that's why we, with our very low capacity, like all charities, we need to make sure we're doing what's needed. So that's why it's really important for us to hold these meetings. So moving on, importantly, to the cost of living appeal and the update, and then we'll move on to the open forum.
Right, we just thought, following on, as this is kind of a follow-on meeting from the previous one, although it doesn't matter if you weren't able to attend that one, we wanted to give a bit of an update because we've just recently launched the cost of living funding programme. We're already starting to get some really good applications coming through into that. Lots of projects that are a really good fit for the fund. So we've also managed to raise, so far we've raised £31,000, although we have got quite a lot of other potential support in the pipeline, and we've got an event coming up to really try and help some of the people who have got donations that they could potentially make in the county to really recognise the need that's out there and understand quite what it's like in some of our communities, because I think some of those more wealthy people in the county might not be as aware as those of you who are working in communities about what it feels like to be in one of those communities at the moment. We've already, as I said, received 13 applications so far, but there are more coming in every day. And I can see that some people that are in this meeting have got applications underway on our system. And it's a rolling programme, so we'll continue to keep it open all the while that we're managing to raise funds. So we're going to do our very best for you all to get some money that we can distribute out. I just wanted to also give a bit of an overview of some of the things that were discussed in the last meeting. So we talked about challenges that were facing communities due to the rise in the cost of living. I listened to quite a lot of thoughts and experiences of people that are working in organisations based in our communities. Some of the themes that ran through that, I wrote lots and lots of notes during the last meeting, and I'll be doing the same today, were that there was an increase in demand for services that seemed to be pretty much across the board, longer waiting lists, food banks, advice services, counselling, befriending services, all seeing a lot more demand. And also a greater severity in terms of needs, so dealing with some much harder cases, people that are struggling, people that are really quite distraught and quite desperate at this time. Widespread fear in a lot of communities and an increase in mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. Lack of food or nourishing food, reductions in donations to food banks, empty shelves, difficulties affording food and basic hygiene products, heating and energy costs becoming unaffordable, and also perhaps in some cases not unaffordable, but just the perception of people feeling really scared that they daren't put on their heating when possibly they actually could manage to put on their heating. So it's that sort of, was particularly with some elderly people who are really concerned about how they're going to manage. I think there's a need for information, and that guidance that a lot of organisations are providing is really vital there. Difficulties accessing services, so organisations saying that people that are struggling to actually get to them because they can't afford the transport, or they don't have access to their own car, or petrol costs are too high to travel distances that they perhaps previously used to be able to do, and that people with disabilities or single income households are being particularly badly affected by the cost of living increase. Then more from an organisational point of view, we heard that there was, as stated previously, an increase in demand for services, but also a reduction in income, so fundraising has become more challenging. Increased operational costs, so the costs for organisations themselves are going up, overheads and staff costs as well, to try and keep up with increases in the cost of living for staff. Challenges fundraising, and let's say a lack of uplift, so where there's multi-year grants or perhaps contracts that people are fulfilling, staff salaries are needing to increase, but a 1% or 2% uplift in grants isn't enough. So some of the ideas as well that came out of the last meeting were around needing to raise awareness, as I've said, about need for support and just quite how desperate it is. And I think it was Dave from Your Next Move who was really interested in perhaps producing a film, which I think would be excellent to share with people, to kind of get some of these stories that everybody are sharing with us across to communities and across to people from different backgrounds in Gloucestershire. And it was also mentioned by a couple of people that not to be too, whilst being reactive, we also need to start thinking about the future and thinking kind of perhaps further forwards and what our vision could be. So that's partly where this comes in, and our conversation today is to think about not just what we do in the immediate time frame, but what can we do to really help our communities in a sort of longer term way. And as we mentioned previously, a real desire for collaborative working, which is really positive. So I'll pass over to Talitha, who's going to talk a little bit about our research for this year.
So stronger communities, it's one of our vital signs. Community foundations have what's called vital signs, and how we monitor and attribute the way we do our grant making across all causes and areas. And so one of these areas is stronger communities, which we've picked this year. So transitioning together, building community. So there is amazing work that goes on, and it's absolutely mind-blowing, the incredible work that goes on in our county. And some of that we really need to highlight and maybe share, just to give others encouragement and ideas. But there's also that transitioning together. I think we've always, year on year, talk about, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could join up the dots and we could collaborate more and we could do less duplication. It's not quite as simple, but I think this is where the conversations start, and where some of the synergies can just gently be teased out in some of these forums. And I think we did some of that in the last meeting. It was quite interesting, some of the connections already starting to be talked about. So this year, our topic on stronger communities, this research will feed into that. So our vision, Gloucestershire is a place where people and communities are empowered to become resilient and strong. So, you know, this is something that we are thinking about now and visioning the future. So this is where our research will talk about what we can hopefully support in today's day, but also keep that future vision. So we'll start with our questions as we did last time, and hope that it prompts some discussion. And if you use the chat box, what we'll do is Sarah will pick out any questions or anything that comes through in the chat box, and she'll stop me, and I can pause to discuss some of those points, along with people putting their hand up, and I'll always put you in order, and I can just go through whose turn it is next, and it seems to work quite well. So if we go for the first question, please. A really open, broad question, which all the other questions will funnel in from. But if we could put it out there in terms of discussion about what makes a strong community, what are the things that we feel make a strong community, would be a really good discussion point. If somebody is brave enough to start us off, Sarah, if you want to take the slides down, and then hopefully we can see everybody. Tracy, first hand up, well done.
Yeah, basically stronger communities is where people are working together for a common goal, really. And I think for us is making sure that the people out in the sort of like rural areas of the Forest of Dean, Gloucestershire, parts of Fairfield and the Cotswolds are able to access the services, because we find that it really prevents people from being able to even attempt to go out. For a lot of our women that have got children, it's then the cost of childcare, the cost of creches. It's just a massive restriction with the financial impact as well. So if communities can work together to provide those things and support, so women can access services, and obviously the men as well, but women particularly with children, and possibly the elderly, I would say as well, where they are limited to access places, would be a massive support. And I think it's over the winter period, it's going to be really crucial that those forgotten areas are working with the bigger areas to meet up together.
So Tracy, and everyone, if you could just say your name and the organisation you're from. I know, Tracy, you're from the Nelson Trust.
Yep.
If everybody, it would be really interesting to know where you're from, just so we have perspective of the work you're doing. That's a really good point, Tracy. Thank you. So what do we think makes a strong community? Bren, hand up.
Thanks, Talitha. Thanks, everybody. I think it's the people who are there, the people who live there, the people who day after day see the opportunities and challenges. And I think what makes a stronger community is when we need to listen, understand, and act on the basis of the communities, and we don't consciously, unconsciously step into that bit about imposing what we think will be needed, but actually really is not really needed. I don't think money is the answer, to be honest. So if I look, and I'll speak frankly now, really, in terms of Barton Treadworth as a geographical area in Gloucester. So sorry, Talita. Bren, I just volunteer in the local community and some bits and bobs, but trying to help people where I can. With this, and I think it's also relevant to where we are. In Barton Treadworth over 20 years plus, we, and I use the we because I feel part of the community, have seen Social Regeneration Budget 5, Social Regeneration Budget 6, Office of Deputy Prime Minister's money, and I could go on and on and on, really. And then when I speak to people and say, well, actually, what do people feel is the legacy? There's none. There doesn't appear to be any, really. Some of the issues are still the same because they are big, complex issues. So I suppose that really stronger communities for me is always having touch points, really, where we can sort of get that to them, and not just when we want them either, really, when you know they're needed. So build a program of work or whatever, really, like communication with the local radio station. We see a lot of people going on there once and talking about it, really, but what I think really is to build that program of work or whatever, really. So sorry, in a long-winded way to and everybody, I think it's the stronger communities are the people, the communities themselves, but also, like any people, communities like families, there will be dynamics in it, and it won't be static. Thank you, Talitha. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bren. I'm just going to pick up, there's some really good chat going on here in the chat box. Retaining volunteers, Kelly, I think, Susie, volunteers, that's a real challenge, isn't it? It's not just about funding, but how do we retain volunteers? It's a real challenge where in the pandemic, volunteering was at a height since World War II, and then we've all gone back to more daily lives, and we're losing our volunteers because people are taking back positions and work and have to spend time elsewhere. So what can we do as a community to inspire volunteering, because our sector really relies on this incredible resource. So our volunteers do help us make stronger communities, so that's a really good point. Difficulty accessing services is a big problem in rural areas. I was disheartened to see Stagecoach closing their routes to rural communities. I think the council are going to have to provide something, but I really do hope there's solutions for Gloucestershire other than Cheltenham and Gloucester, who have retained routes, that we continue to support our rural communities. So very good point. We also find that many elderly people are reluctant to accept charity. I think a lot of people are reluctant to accept charity. You know, people queuing at food banks for the first time, there's shame involved of feeling maybe you're failing in some way because you're having to use services, when actually that's the reality. If I think the stats are you have to earn over £45,000 as a family to pay your bills. So that includes an awful lot of people this year. So I think there is a reluctance to access services, and how isolating and lonely that must be if you are struggling or suffering and maybe feeling you can't access services for whatever reason. So that's a really good point. Nice. Just thinking about stronger communities. Equality of access is key. It's not just about equality of opportunity. Definitely. Thanks, Matt. It is the ability to embrace it. We're working with local council. So Margaret Bishop, we're working with local council to provide a warm space. We make people welcome and give them help and advice. And as we have a huge database of all activities available, both local and national. So this is some of the amazing work going on. Martin could work with needs, small team of people, pay position, coordinate support. Good. I think our public services are delivered on the basis of equality across a large geographical area. They do not focus on creating equity in the community. They need to be more locally focused and responsive rather than a broad brush. So would you say stronger communities are about that localism, I guess, of communities being asked and consulted about what they actually need, and having a say in how things are created and delivered. So I agree, that's a really, really important point. Common unity. Okay, so a few more hands up and I'll come back to the chat. Cleo and then Marie.
Good afternoon. You did touch on some of the things while you were speaking just then. However, I think the biggest problem, and it's not just the areas, as Bren said, of Barton and Treadworth and those areas are definitely the issues. However, maybe instead we're being done to rather than done for, and we hear the words, and you come to a meeting and you hear the words, but then when this conversation, as in today, goes away, when you wake up to reality, there's so minimal changes, and you can't see positive change or change in a magnitude that you can actually recognize it. And so I think people get, I believe people get more deflated about it, because what's the use of putting your hand above the parapet and then whatever you said or whatever, and it's not just one person saying, there's probably quite a few people when you go to all these different meetings, it's being said, but then there doesn't seem to be a resolution.
Yeah. Good point. It's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? Sometimes we feel like we're discussing the same old thing and we go around in circles, and it's a talking shop and we're not seeing enough action. So I completely agree with you, Cleo. Marie, sorry.
And so for elections, you see people coming around. So maybe they should have clinics or things that are just for specific things, even if it's only once a month, that people can see that I've come today, next month somebody else might have said the same thing. Then hopefully people will think, well, 20 people have now told me this, why isn't it happening? Or when you have a face-to-face or you have a conversation, even like this, you can see that you're actually looking in my eyes and seeing what I'm saying. Well, you're not, because I'm darkened, but you know what I mean.
I was just going to say, I can't quite see what you're saying, but I do hear you.
I don't know why I'm blocked out.
Cleo, it's a really good point and hugely frustrating, and I hope, this piece of research, we do share it with everybody. I think there's a piece around trying to share the voices of community, and you hope that there'll be some interest in that, and there is definite appetite. There seems to be these conversations happening in the county. Oh, here we go, thank you. We can see you. There is definite appetite to talk about collaborating and listening more. So we hope maybe some of us that are doing these things will also collaborate and listen to each other. So a really good point. Marie. I'm going to say it, Marie, you're on mute.
It's always one, isn't there?
Always one.
My name is Marie Whitaker. I was Longstaff. I got married in summer, and I run a local charity, a mental health charity.
What's the name, Marie?
Centred Horseplay.
Oh, brilliant.
Horseplay. And what I was going to say was about the council stuff. So in my previous life, I was a local councillor as well. And I think one of the big things is, in terms of trying to get a voice in the community, I think our communities probably are more diverse now than they ever have been. So finding like one thing that unites all of those people to create a voice is really difficult. But when I was a councillor, and so you almost need something that links them together to create that community to start with. So when I was first a councillor, I was in a ward that hated the party that I was. So I found an issue that I knew they all felt really passionate about, and I engaged my local community, and I ended up having massive amounts of volunteers that worked with me because I found something that ticked the box of the vast majority. Now that doesn't mean it's a voice for everybody, but you create that sort of like snowball effect then, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people said, well, actually go and speak to Marie. You know, she knows somebody else in so-and-so. And if she doesn't know someone, she'll put you through to someone else like that. So you almost need a center of the community, and that's really hard to do, I think.
So making a stronger community, or what makes stronger communities, is having a centre. So is that a centre by district? Is that a centre across Gloucestershire? How do we create centres? Who creates the centres?
Well, a
Or who should
commonality.
create the centres?
I mean, I think councillors is a really good start, because they've also got budget. So they will be, you know, when we shut post offices, we had a huge amount of budget to go out and sort of like talk to people about whether that was the right thing and what else we could do as, you know, as a backup. It's almost not like it being a centre, but it's almost, you've got to start the ball rolling somewhere. So you've got to find somebody that's really passionate about change and has access to things that are change. And then you grow that by getting other like-minded individuals to sort of like create a bit more momentum, I think.
So I think like Springbank in Cheltenham, so Sue Potter, so a shop, food pantry, cafe, and I've visited Springbank, and it is a fantastic organisation, attracting lots of people within the area, and it's wonderful the work that they have done from being quite small and growing. So these are the centres, aren't they? There's some examples of centres that are working really well. I'm just looking if there's any other. Having a place to meet where we operate a community shop, and additionally a place to meet. We also have a kitchen and provide delivered fortnightly meals, now embarking on building a new shop in Bromsborough. Oh, fantastic. These community spaces, do you think food is the bit that we have in common? Food does attract people, doesn't it? That common element of enjoying food together. And the need for food, obviously. So there's some good common themes coming through. Anybody else? Stronger communities. What makes a stronger community? So maybe we'll move on to the next question and hone it in a little bit into a more detailed question. So Sarah's going to bring the question up, and I'm going to read through. We know there's always amazing work happening. So we know there's incredible work happening. So this isn't to say how are we going to do things better when we already know incredible work's happening, but how can we build stronger communities and a stronger community? So what is already working in your community? We've seen the food shops or the central hubs. What are the things that are working really well already in the real success stories in your community, things that are helping build your local community? Can anybody volunteer with some of the things that are working really well that you can share with us and inspire us to think differently, or maybe come to you for some advice?
Can I just say a really obvious one?
Yeah.
A really obvious one. I live in Minchinhampton, and the Minchinhampton Facebook group is amazing. Like, it's unbelievable. Can you help me? Something's happened and I've lost my cat. And before you know it, half of the village is out in the street helping a woman find her cat, because
Brilliant.
It's in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and everyone's sat in front of their computers, and that's the one thing that we can all do is access Facebook.
Well, some of us, yeah, and I do, and I think it is a really good point.
Yeah.
But you know, if you've got elderly people and some of those other people that haven't got technology,
These are all old people.
Yeah,
These are all old people. They're generally all old people. It's the silver
some
surfer.
very good
Honestly.
technological older people.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So Blanche, I think you were next, and then Miranda.
Yes, you mentioned food a while ago, and I think since last year we've been having most of our elderly who are single women who've been coming to the All Nations Community Center, where we have a well-being program on a Wednesday. And since then, we've been feeding every Wednesday over 51 people.
Oh, wow.
But it's funding really is our problem. Yeah. So, I'm not sure how much funding we can apply for. I tried to start an application, but the amount of people we are cooking for, you know, it's unbelievable to have paid staff, because we don't have many volunteers as such either. And so it's people who are also, those people who would do the cooking are people who are unemployed. So they are looking employment, but they are willing to do the one day, but the cost of hourly rate, you know, the funding that we have, it's impossible to keep it going really.
So how have you built up those 50 people? This was because of your well-being program and opening the doors and encouraging people through to the point you were then, did you start feeding because there was a necessity because there was a food shortage, people needed food, or was it more about community and bringing people together? What was the need? How's that program developed?
It was both. It was both. We have a carers group, and I applied for some funding and got that funding, but we also applied to Active Gloucester, where we start the exercise session. So from that, it builds up. We start with 15 and now we have 50 odds.
Yeah, amazing.
So it's both. It's food and activities. Yeah.
Food and and I've seen your videos, Blanche. They're fantastic.
Yes, but we also have a problem with the transportation because there's a small community van, but we still have to pay a driver because we don't have the volunteers also. So all these costs build up and, you know, make it quite expensive, really.
Okay, so we'll probably go on to talking about the barriers and things in a bit, but it's a great piece that's working well, and how you've encouraged your community to come together out of isolation, loneliness, or a need for activity, mental health and well-being. It's a wonderful example of great work going on in the community. I think we've got Susie and then Tracy. Oh, sorry, Miranda, there you are.
Sorry, can I just quickly,
Miranda.
it's sort of following on from what Blanche was saying, just an example of what's going on in Stroud town rather than the district. There are 5 community hubs that have been working really well together, and it very much centers around food. So most of them have some kind of food offer, whether it's a food pantry or a community cafe, pay as you feel. And they all came together over COVID. They meet twice a month online. They share resources. They share volunteers. The fair share distribution comes, and then it goes to one of them, and then they distribute to the other hubs. There's the famous Stroud Market on a Saturday. They get volunteers that go to the stores at the end of the day, and then they take all the stuff that hasn't been sold goes to the hub. So it's a really, really good example of how hubs come together around, and they built that sort of relationships of trust. They're all very different, they're very unique, but they've come together around food. And they have these postcards and posters that they hand out to people, maybe homeless people on the street, or they go to places where they know a lot of quite vulnerable groups go to get hot meals during the day, soup kitchens, Salvation Army, and they hand out a postcard showing where they can go every day of the week to get a community meal. So it's a really good example of how hubs have come together to around food and coordinate. They're just about to recruit a food management coordinator, which is paid for by one of the county councillors, and that's going to really sort of take it up a notch, linking up with local growers, local farmers, local businesses. It's really quite a good example.
That's absolutely brilliant. Are these 5 hubs independent or linked?
They're all independent and fiercely independent. They are very unique and serve and host very different parts of the town, but they come together around this, and it's great to see.
And so if I wanted to join one of the hubs, would you know which hub to join, or what would suit you, or can you access all of them?
Yeah, I mean, you can access all of them, and I'm very happy to share the poster.
Yeah, amazing. Please do. Please share anything in the chat. I think it's just a fantastic model of community hubs and how then possibly, like you say, the next steps of joining with other organisations, that collaborative piece is very exciting to hear. Thank you, Miranda. Susie, you're next.
Okay, thanks. I'm Susie Bromwich from Cotswold Friends in the North Cotswolds. We run 7 community services. One is transport, which is, I think, a common denominator for us all. No, I was just going to echo the food thing. The first thing that came back strongly when we resumed our services to more pre-COVID levels and formats. It was the lunch clubs, all our community activities, but the lunch clubs came back first. Real strong desire for people to get out and share food together. We just lucky we had a grant to help kickstart our digital IT support projects. And one of the ways that we're going to be able to deliver that is through our community activities and through our lunch clubs. So people can come along with order, there's some help with IT, send a message, or a blue badge, apply for their blue badge, or whatever, or access GP appointments. So that was the one thing, was the food and the bringing people together so strong. And the other thing I think about is also we found, of course, is our strong connections and good relationships with GP surgeries and local other professional services, but particularly the GP services who social prescribe or refer clients to us for our various services. So they've been tremendously supportive, and really keeping in touch with that network has been very, very important for what we do anyway. Okay.
That's amazing. And you are very much in the rural communities right over in Morton in the Marsh and those surrounding areas. And I think everybody's mentioned transport as a barrier. That's the one thing you have managed with your volunteers and your funding.
Thank you. And you may know also we're trying, and it will take time, but to extend our transport. So we've started a hub already in the area around Cirencester. And we're looking at other areas, particularly very rural areas. We're partnering with Lydney Dial-a-Ride, looking down to that area, and trying to extend this model of community transport in other areas where there is very little or nothing.
That's really interesting to hear, because I've not heard that yet. Would you share any information? Because I know transport is such a huge issue in rural communities. If you could share that with anyone. I know there's Cirencester and rural people who work rurally would be really interested to know. The work you're doing around transport would be hugely helpful. Thank you.
It's all going to depend on funding.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. But I think if we can demonstrate need, the whole point of, I guess, the conversations, and we can see here with the chat, transport's nearly in every conversation, you know. We've got to encourage donors, certainly on the philanthropy side. Donors want to see really exciting projects in the old days of funding, but actually there's a really important piece of us educating and inspiring our donors to think about the things that are less glamorous but have huge impact. So if we can show the impact, if we can show the need, if we can show the impact, then the thought about transport being not so exciting is sort of on the side, and we can show the impact of connecting people. It just becomes more inspiring to encourage philanthropy, encourage funding to these areas. But we can see and we can demonstrate with the feedback coming through today, this is a concern for everybody in most areas. So that's brilliant. Thank you, Susie. Who have we got? Tracy, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, for a couple of things really. The social media aspect is a massive thing to advertise what people do, and I think a lot of people aren't always aware of what programs and projects are being ran, so that makes it really difficult. So if you are in a rural community, you're not going to necessarily know what's going on or where to get some support. And it's for the elderly particularly, they would find it very difficult to know about a lot of organisations. They may not be very IT okay with things. So having that thing, I know, is a major thing for us. Not everybody's aware of what the Nelson Trust does. So I think it's something that I'm based in Swindon today, but so raising the profile of the work we do in Swindon, people aren't necessarily aware of that. So in the other communities, it must be just the same. And another thing, we actually have community hubs as well. We've got the Clean Plates and the Sober Parrot that offer these sort of like community hubs where people can go and have something to eat and drink. And we've also got the Hub Academy where people can learn and sort of like re-skilled. And I think we're all thinking about sort of like people that may be a little bit older, but what about the young people? These are the ones that we're going to need to be looking forward to in the future for things to be sustained. And I think we need to offer things for them, because it's those we're trying to get involved in things things to keep things going, and it's trying to get those people to come out, because those are the ones that are reluctant to get involved with things because of different reasons. So it's trying to give them some sort of like buyback for joining in and doing things, really.
So Tracy, that's probably on our next question around some of the things we'd like to see. So I'll finish up on this one around, is there anything else happening in communities that is fantastic that you can share with us?
I think Margaret Bishop had her hand up a little while ago. I don't know whether Margaret wanted
can't
to
see
speak.
Margaret.
Yes.
Margaret, hello.
We run a talking cafe, drop-in coffee shop. It's a very rural area, and it's no good unless services are local. It's got to be within walking distance of people, because that's the only way they can access things. We have a paid organizer who networks with literally 40 or 50 different organizations. Everything that's happening in the area, it's her job to know. And then we get people in because it's just a social thing. We invite them to drop in. We put on workshops, health walks, things that interest people to get their interest. So it's not just coming for charity. When they come to us, we talk to people, and then our organizer, she can make referrals to food banks, she can make referrals to GPs. She's got this solution to most people's problems, passing them on to the appropriate organization. It's hugely successful. We feel it's a model of how social care can be provided in rural areas, and we'd like to see it spread. It's based on the Frome model for integrated social care, started by some GPs in Frome. And they found actually that after 3 years of their activities, the unplanned admissions to hospital of emergency elderly people had dropped by 15% at a time when the rest of Somerset was increasing all the time.
How interesting.
So theirs is funded by their local clinical care providers, because it saves them money. In this area, the clinical care providers are short of money and they don't appreciate the benefits. So we haven't got a source of funding, but we think it's the way, it's the future for social services in rural areas. It's got to be local. You have something drop in, you attract people, and then you have someone there who is paid to know everything and contact all the other organizations and network and pass it on. And it really works.
That's amazing. Margaret, just remind us where you are.
Fairford and Letchlade.
I thought you were Fairford and Letchlade. That's brilliant. Thank you. That's really fascinating. And I wasn't aware of the Frome model, so something else for me to be looking up. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Anybody else with some good examples, and then I'll move on. I'm just mindful time's ticking. Any other good examples, do also share. There's some really good information coming through the chat. So we'll move on to the next question. So the piece around what are the shared opportunities in building a stronger community, the shared opportunities, it's been touched on, some of those things that we can do to maybe share in order to capitalize and build a stronger community. Is there any examples, or is there any way that you think we could be sharing opportunities to increase and build the resilience and strength in our communities? So the sharing piece. Anybody, any thoughts? Shared opportunities. Debbie.
Yeah, I think what I'm finding is just...
Debbie, just say where you're from, because we'd love to know.
I'm a trustee at the Spring Centre.
The Spring Centre, brilliant.
And yeah, I think these kind of meetings seems really useful, that whole awareness of who else is out there in your community doing what, and how you can refer people, how you can share resources. And you know, because I think Bridget was on last time and saying, you know, our unit is available evenings and weekends. We don't use it for those times, and I'm sure there are places out there that need somewhere to meet or to do something, and it's that working together, isn't it? And like you say, with the community transport, just being aware that they're there so we can refer people to it, and so all meeting together and getting that awareness of who's out there and who does what is just really, that's a good place to start, I think. That
mapping exercise of who does what. I guess, I mean, VCSE is brilliant. I mean, they've got a really good reach with their newsletters and everything going on, which is fantastic. I guess it's how everybody engages. You know, I mean, it's brilliant if organizations can share on social what they're doing, and we all then share that. So there's, I guess, sharing in meetings, there's sharing in newsletters, and sharing on social media. So I think we've all time poor, but I think we could all get a lot better at sharing. We're all so busy in our own jobs, maybe we forget to share. So that's a really, really good point. Anybody else in terms of what are the shared opportunities? Can anyone see, feel, hear shared opportunities? Do you think there's something we're missing out on, or should be doing, or that we are doing? I might come back to that one because it's definitely got people thinking, but probably we need to be maybe a little bit more about the barriers. So in terms of, if we think about some of the barriers, it may prompt us to think about some of the solutions. So what are the barriers or risks to ideas? I think building stronger communities, we're aware of a number of barriers with the cost of living crisis. We're aware of various barriers, but I think there's more than the obvious ones. So would anyone like to start me off with what are the barriers, the risk taking, or the barriers to us really seeing our ideas and vision through to fruition? Claire.
Yeah, sorry, this is not barriers, this is actually opportunities and what people are doing at the moment. So I'm representing Cheltenham Borough Homes. Obviously we support people from lower incomes, we house them. So obviously the cost of living crisis is a big concern to us. However, at the moment we're feeling that potentially our residents have got their heads in the sands, or they're not approaching us, maybe because we're the landlord, maybe they're not telling us what they're worried about, so there's obviously a mixed issue going on there. So anyway, in Cheltenham, I don't know if anyone else on this call is in Cheltenham, but the council are coordinating the approach, and they're doing warm hubs, which is not a news flash, lots of people are doing this already, but there's loads and loads of warm hubs being set up at the moment. We're doing one on a Thursday at St Paul's, and on a Tuesday in the Wadden area. And also I sit on the sort of network of all the food pantries. So people are really pulling together to try and support people. But also as well, I support a social enterprise where the gentleman that is running this has got really big visions about changing the food distribution. So trying to get parcels of land in Cheltenham and trying to create market gardens to prevent food being sort of shipped in. And it's really a longer term approach, and he will be looking for some funding, probably social enterprise funding, to potentially employ somebody to be tending those fruits and vegetables. And he's very well connected, and we're looking at obviously things like tomatoes and things like that, we all eat them, but they're very, very difficult to grow. You need massive greenhouses, lots of energy. So it's actually working out what the best type of things are to grow. And then the vision then is to actually supply all the food pantries and the with this fresh fruit and vegetables at a low cost, so that people aren't having to buy them into Bookers and things like that.
That's really interesting. I think quite a lot of information there, Claire. So just
sorry,
rambling it's fantastic.
On, yeah.
Just where do you access the information? I know there's quite a few people from Cheltenham on the call, but in terms of if anyone was to help promote or let people know what was happening, where are the hubs? Is there a link on a site to say where the locations are, or anything that you can share?
There will be. So if anyone wants to get involved or wants to get connected, if you contact Kelly Patterson, I'll put her contact details in the chat now in a minute. So she basically is pulling everyone together. So Sarah Avery from Family Space family's place.
Brilliant.
She was originally facilitating this, but obviously she's, you know, very, very busy because this was this extra thing for her. So now she's also, they're in the process of employing somebody as well. Like somebody else on the call said, I think they were doing that in Stroud, was it? Where they were employing somebody to coordinate the food network. So they're doing that in Cheltenham as well, because it's a big project. And
it is,
you know, as I think it was Tracy was saying, the Nelson Trust, you know, they were very, you know, obviously Sober Parrot have been very, very involved in all the whole network, the food network in Cheltenham. So yeah, so I'll pop up the information on the chat.
Brilliant.
We've got lots of, so the way we advertise stuff to our local people is again through, you know, we've got Facebook, we've got quite a lot of people on our Facebook groups. We've got over 2,000 people.
Which Facebook group would it be under?
What again, I'll put them on the chat.
Put everything on the chat. Brilliant.
Yeah, we run 3 Facebook pages, and anyone can join them that work in Cheltenham, because they're quite a good. We try and, as a community investment officer, my role really is to try and link people up together, you know. Brilliant. So that, that's one of my roles anyway. So that I'm sharing information, so I'm always listening and then passing information on. Fantastic. But we use those what's on. It's what's on. We've got what's on Cheltenham West, what's on St Paul's and St Peter's, and what's on Oakley as well. So I think there's about 2,000 members on those networks. Amazing. They're not purely our tenants; they are local people. But obviously, we always want to try and get our tenants involved, you know, because obviously they're our main recipients.
That's fantastic amount of information. Thank you, and really appreciate it that you share it in the chat box. Anna, I think I've just seen your hand go up, and then we need to move on to the next question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Talitha. It's both the problem and the solution. One of the issues that I've observed is that for much smaller groups and unconstituted groups particularly, that are really embedded in our places, in our communities, doing fantastic things, just need small amounts of money. They haven't got the capacity or the knowledge or the skills, the learning to do funding applications. They don't even know that such a thing is for them. One of the solutions I think that could be a game changer is the notion of fiscal hosting or funding platforms, where any organisation that feels they can set up an online platform and become a fiscal host. So collect money on behalf of those small unconstituted groups or even constituted ones, and be a central point for funders like yourselves to come and just slot money in what are called collectives. And what's wonderful about it is completely open and transparent. So all the money going in is seen, who it's from, how much it is, and all the expenditure can be seen completely pound by pound up there for anyone to look at. And it's really fantastic. I'll put the link to ours. We've set
Anna, just let everyone know where you're from. I know where you're from.
Sorry, yeah. Creative Sustainability based in Stroud District. And we've set up this fiscal hosting platform for our Stroud District community hubs, particularly focusing on warm welcome spaces this winter. So I'd really welcome people to have a look at it. If any organisation feels they can do that for their district, happy to talk to them and support people to understand what that really looks like and what you need to do.
Amazing. Thank you for that really kind offer. I'm sure people, if they're thinking of setting up, it's always worth talking to people that are already doing it. So thank you, Anna, for that really generous offer of support. I'm going to quickly move on. So barriers or risks to ideas. So funding, we hear funding a lot in terms of barriers to some of the things we'd love to do. We've got vision to do. What are some of the other barriers? Carol, is that a new hand? Hi, Carol.
Hiya, yes, indeed, it is a new hand. I'm Carol, I'm from North and West Gloucestershire Citizens Advice. Now, one of the big barriers certainly we're experiencing, and I think every organisation we've spoken to over the last 12 months is experiencing, is capacity issues. and real challenges in recruiting volunteers, but also staff, and getting them trained up to the level and the time lag between the two. And we've got amazing plans, and you know, we're very fortunate. We've got my role that can access funding, but actually delivery is becoming an increasing challenge because we can't find the people, staff or volunteers, and get them up to speed quickly enough to actually deliver in a timely manner. So it's a bit of a biggie, because I know we're not alone, and you can't solve employment issues and volunteering across the whole country, but it is a real limiting factor on ambition, and people are having to prioritize what they do deliver over what they would love to deliver. And I think
it's a really good point, Carol. I think there's a couple of things. There's a very good website that's been set up, Gloss Volunteering. Has anyone been using
the Go Volunteer?
Go Volunteer. Has anyone been using it successfully?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think it's set up and it's running very well. The problem is there isn't the public awareness of it yet.
Right. So do we all need to share it? I mean, I was really impressed. I thought it was a brilliant initiative that's been set up. I've shared it with a few people that have talked about volunteering. I'm probably not sharing it enough, but there is, you know, already some action around trying to put a collaborative, cohesive way of bringing volunteers and volunteering together. I don't know if someone can share the link in the chat box, because I can't multitask quite as well as trying to do that. And in terms of our sector, do you think that we are doing enough to, I've come from, it's my first time in the third sector, and I tell you what, it's the most brilliant job I've ever had. I've had a great career, don't get me wrong, I've loved my jobs, I'm still in touch with all my bosses, so I better be careful with what I say, but you know, coming into this sector and working in this sector is brilliant, it's amazing. And I just wonder how much we're encouraging people to cross sectors and come in, you know, and work in this sector. Do we shine a light enough on how brilliant this sector is to work in, whether you're working in the business sector or public sector? You know, are we doing enough to really encourage people to come and work with us? I'm not sure we are. So maybe there's a lot more to do. I mean, the film, I think we've been talking about a film, and we're not doing enough to shine a light on the work we do. It's very much amongst our sector, and it's not being shared externally. So I think there's a lot more work we must do, and maybe that's linking up with the business community and various others, so, and the LEP, etc. So I think there's a lot of work to do around us really trying to encourage volunteering and people to come and work in this sector. Any other solutions, any other good stories around the barriers around volunteering? Anyone done anything that's really been successful and helped them in this area? If I can't see your hand up, maybe just give me a yell. Marie. Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry, done it again. The nature of what we do, we say that the only people that are allowed to volunteer for us are people that have been through the charity. So they've been participants, so that they're all quite like-minded. And that works really well. But what I have found is that we've got lots of young people and adults that might be interested in doing other things. So we had a father and daughter came, and the father went on and did some volunteering for something else, because he didn't want to come and volunteer at a farm. You know, he's going to do a bit of stuff for us, but it's not quite relevant. So we have most of the young people. So if there was a hub of local things like this, like I've taken the information about the stuff I can do in and around Minch and Stroud area, but if there was a little thing for us to see, really good local community projects where we could funnel these people into being volunteers, they would love it, because they're people that are not being able to be at work for various reasons. So they're perfect candidates, really.
Brilliant. I wonder if that website would be helpful.
yeah, I've noted that down. That's great.
Yeah, brilliant. And other ways of encouraging volunteering. I mean, I basically said to my friends, they see me come, and I said, you know, you need to get a bit more purpose in your life. Go and do some volunteering. And they have, and all they talk about now is their volunteer work. So once people start, it is amazing for your own mental health and well-being just to give back to community. So we've got to try and encourage that amongst our circles, and probably a bit more publicly. Tracy, last bit before we move on.
Hi, yeah, basically it was about volunteering and sustainability. I think the problem that we have is accessing volunteers, because if we're struggling to recruit staff because of the sustainability of their jobs, with a lack of funding, it makes it very, very difficult for them to have volunteers if our staff could end up being out of work within 6 months. And I think that's the problem that we've got. The pay isn't matching what the people do, and the pay is not going up, and it's not gone up, so the uplift is not there. So people aren't going to apply for these jobs to come and work because actually it's not matching their needs and the cost of living. So, you know, it's a poorly paid sector, and that makes a massive difference on why we can't recruit staff. So if we can't recruit staff, we're not going to get them as volunteers either.
So why are we a poorly paid sector? Is that because we're not being seen to show value? Because to me, I mean, I think I've remembered some stats from you at the Nelson Trust. It costs £45,000 to keep a woman in prison for the year, and you get £1,000 to give them support and rehabilitation, not to go back into prison. So there's £45,000 going into the prison system to keep that person in prison for a year, yet you get £1,000 to support them, and an over a 90% rate of them not reoffending. To me, I just don't know, especially where it's coming through statutory funding and various funding, whether we're really demonstrating, or whether there's a disconnect with the value this sector provides, and why this support is not coming through in terms of funding.
I think from working in the care sector and then working now for the Nelson Trust, seeing how wages just haven't matched what people actually need, and then travelling over vast areas of the community, people can't afford to then sort of like work in the care communities because it's too far to travel to get to places. It's going to cost them too much money in petrol. They can't then afford the food or anything when they hear the expenses. So why are they going to go and work for something when they could be when they're going to be earning £21,000 a year, and they're not going to actually be taking that home when everything else has gone up? So that's why we can't sustain staff. They'll start it, they all want to come and work, but the thing is, to sustain them long term, they can't afford to work. Not for these charities, it's impossible, and the wages aren't good enough really to match what everybody does, definitely.
So it's the other resources around volunteering is so key. If you've got those gaps, that we can try and inspire and encourage volunteering to come in and try and support some of those that need and gaps. So it's a huge constraint on delivering, you know, your wonderful vision and ideas, like one of you was saying, you know, Carol. So this funding is so key, which is why we need to put a little bit more pressure, maybe a bit, as we're not apolitical, but a bit more pressure on some of that levelling up funding and various funding that seems to go around that doesn't seem to be felt in our sector. I'm going to move on to a twofold. What do you need to make this happen, and how can funders help? So in terms of building stronger communities, what do we need to make this happen? So we've heard funding and volunteering and resource are key. They're the two fundamentals, but there are also lots of other things that make up stronger communities. So what do you need to make this happen? So within your communities, what are the other needs? What are some of the other needs, or something within our gift that we have control over, or we have the availability to use or capture a resource and use it within our communities? And essentially, how can funders help in this process? Tracy, I'm going to come back to you, but I really need, come on guys, we need more people contributing here. Tracy's doing all the work, come on. Now, what are some of the other things that help build stronger communities that you think that funders should help with? Is it other things other than funding? What are some of the other things that we can do to support stronger communities? Margaret, then Carol, then Anna, then Bren, and then I'll come back to you, Tracy.
Well, networking is very good. We do a lot of that, and cooperating, not competing with other organisations in the area. That definitely makes you stronger. The more you network, the more you know what's happening and about things, the better things go. But we do need funding.
Good point. And the collaboration, I mean, there is a real appetite to collaborate and partnership and maybe stronger together, and maybe pooling resources or giving support where one has something and the other has something else. So that's a really, really good point. Carol.
I mean, I think fundamental to any strong community is removing stigma, judgment. Yep. And I think especially where people are struggling, they withdraw from society, their communities. They don't engage in other activities. They won't even turn up to a lunch club because they don't want the judgment and the stigma. And I think anything we can do that means more people access what is already there before we even look at building more, if we can somehow work with funders to move this stigma away from seeking help is a bad thing to actually it's a really positive thing in whatever form that takes, whether it's advice, whether it's food, whether it's company, because people are lonely. If we can do more just to remove that stigma and people will come forward and access things earlier, then their issues tend not to escalate to such a high level. So say anything you can do with funders to reinforce that message that actually going and proactively seeking help and support is a good, positive thing and should be admired and not judged with stigma attached, I think would be a really good starting point.
That's a really good point, Carol. Thank you. Susie, then Anna, then Bren.
I think I'd probably just echo what's already been said, but I think communications is so vital, whether it's networking, whether it's shouting out what you're doing, whether it's being in touch through parish councils, through existing networks, or this kind of exercise this afternoon, and being very clear with your message and telling the world around you about what is happening and what you're doing. And so the more supporters and funders who can also help with that, it doesn't cost anything, that I'm sure that helps as well.
So what would you like to see a funder like us doing more of? Do you want to see us doing more of these? Because it's a two-part. Would you want to see us continue this?
Found this one very, very useful. It's excellent, especially for networking and getting ideas and points of view is fabulous, and knowing what's going on. I really meant the sort of communications about telling our local communities or the wider community about what charities are doing and what is out there, what is available, and it's a skill, but there's a myriad facets to it, aren't there, with the different choices of communication that we have these days. So it's not a simple thing.
No, thank you, Susie. That's really interesting. Anna, Bren, and then Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple of things. There's something about representing the sector in all its complexity more accurately. We do a lot of talking about charities, and I think that this notion of funding and all, and so on, it's quite singular in its approach. We've got social enterprises, we've got community interest companies by Shell. There are so many different things that are all about not-for-profit and generating stuff in our communities. I think that would be really helpful. I think that would help us work with the public sector and also people in our communities understanding us better and how we work and what our needs are. And then the other thing is staff salaries. I do think this is critical, and I would like our funders to be a little bit more bossy actually about what we should be paying people in a fair and transparent way, and what kind of levels and grades of salary associated with what sort of work, where that is potentially commensurate with the private sector, because I think the sector on the whole is so modest and overly modest about what it achieves and how hard that work is. I think we probably need, as an entire sector, some support to raise our game on that one, so that we get great people in our jobs and we retain them. And then actually there is a third thing, forgive me, it is about partnership working. We all want to do it. It's incredibly difficult. So many of us have had really difficult negative experiences of it in the past, and it's really hard to go back once you've been bitten. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of work, not just in this sector, but through, you know, sort of cross-sector working. We need help. We need investment in that. And we need ongoing support to make good partnerships.
So is that the essence of trust? I mean, if things don't go right, it starts from trust, these partnerships, doesn't it? And how you build that trust or get that trusted connection. I think that's the start of it, because we were all nervous about having to possibly be feeling like we're pressured into partnerships and partnership working, when actually it's a lot of extra work, or considered maybe extra work. And is it right for our organisation? And it's so much easier just to get on with our day to day, but the value in it is amazing if we get it right, and the trust is there. So a really good point. The other thing I wanted to pick up on was demonstrators. We had a live conversation with Civic Square. I don't know if any of you guys know them, up in Birmingham, really inspiring group, and the director there. And she was talking about how they have reimagined neighbourhoods and communities, and they call it something called demonstrators. And so they're very much about getting people to set up demonstrators to show the community. No point talking about it, but you've got to set it up and show everybody just how it's going to work. So they set up this whole piece on zero carbon in a big area of Birmingham, and had no luck from government to try and get anyone to think about their houses or energy or anything. But they got one house to set up a little stall in the front of the house with all the information, and set up this demonstrator, and it grew and grew and grew street by street. And so it took just 2 people to do that. And so I'm just wondering, like you say, having some people do stuff, but how are we sharing it? How are we getting that out there? So anyone funding or statutory public sector businesses know what's going on and can get involved. So I think we've got to set up the demonstrators, but then we've got to get the word out about the amazing work going on. So good point, Anna. Sarah. Can't hear you.
Sorry, my mouse had gone into freeze, so I was trying to unfreeze it. Yeah, so it's kind of building on what other people have been saying, really, around kind of sharing and knowledge sharing and communication, and particularly sharing knowledge around different communities and community gatekeepers. You know, and obviously there's a lot of people, a lot of people in the room kind of keen to work with communities and not having the access into them, or the kind of ways in, or the understanding or the knowledge of those communities. You know, so that may be something that you could kind of build on. For example, you know, we've got our social prescribing scheme, you know, kind of free tickets through. When we're working with organisations like CCP and Cheltenham Welcomes Refugees, it's working really effectively. You know, we want to be able to kind of make more connections with communities, to be able to kind of get kind of cultural opportunities out into those communities, and we'd really welcome opportunities to kind of talk to people about who those community gatekeepers are and how we make those connections.
Amazing. How would you like that done, Sarah? Do you want people to message you in the chat box, or how are you encouraging people to come and link with you at Cheltenham Festivals?
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Just if people want to put their details in the chat box, or you know, kind of contact us directly. If you're working with communities who you know would benefit from that kind of social prescribing around free tickets for events, outreach work, opportunities that we kind of provide, we've got the facilities to do that. We want to connect with communities.
Brilliant.
So if people know those communities, yeah, just give me a shout. Why don't I put my email in the chat box, and then people can contact me.
And you'll be flooded in no time, I'm sure, Sarah. Brilliant. That's wonderful, Sarah, and lovely to meet you. I don't think we've met yet, so brilliant, lovely to meet you. And it's really exciting when we've got some amazing organisations that are wide-reaching, like Cheltenham Festivals, just the linking up with small and large groups. So it's really exciting to see various size organisations on here. And well done on getting some funding today, by the way. Very exciting to see the ACE funding coming through for our county, and sadly some haven't, but it's great to see lots have. I'm just going to finish with you, Bren, and then we're going to sum up. So Bren, last one on this final question. What do you need to make this happen, and what do you need from funders? I'm sure you've got a good closing piece there, Brent.
So I think a lot of it is, I think, basic really, to be honest. But I think, like anything, let's kind of like peel the onion back a bit further and find the layers that we should be at, not what we think we're at, and whatever really. And we've mentioned them, haven't we? Trust, action, demonstrators. I like that a bit in Birmingham, whatever, the investment of time, whatever. So on one level, although it's a complex area, the basics aren't complex, really. That's what we need to have. So I just wrote a few things down, and they'll come as no surprise to you, Talita, or a few other people, is let's just keep looking who's not there. Absolutely be curious and active of looking who is not there.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah, the other bit.
It's asking people to join in. So even if people aren't there, like you say, if you think there's people of influence that would really add, you know, just to reach out. I've done that a couple of times. I think a few of you are on here because you may have missed the information, and it's just trying to reach out. So who's not here and who can we encourage?
Yeah, and also the other bit is it is really to invest in some time to find out why as well, really. And we've talked a lot about services, really. That's really good. But for me, it's about the experiences. So we can be offering the service, but what's the experience of people of that service or not service? The bit about collaboration, partnerships, etc. Hear that every single day and whatever, really. But I do think sometimes some of the people that I'm privileged to serve in groups or whatever, the reason why that may not be the case is because historically over the time or whatever, those community groups have just been used to tick off boxes for other community groups or whatever, draw down the funding and then come out and say, we'd like to work with you, we've got no funding or whatever, really. Tick the boxes again and we complete the cycle again and again and again. So again, the people that I think the most need don't always get it, and we grow organisations rather than actually deliver services to community. I think the latest I've heard is like anchor organisations, really, to be honest, and my anxiety around that or whatever is, whilst there will obviously be clear benefits of that, there is risks. So we haven't talked much about the risk, and the risk is that they become monopolies and they become the go-to points, etc. Really. I think it's communication, but for me, it's about effective communication. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of people get a lot of communication, and you have to look at it and think, actually, you know, so what's the meaning behind this, and is it effective? So not just communication. I think we need to talk about as funders what it's not as well, really, very clearly what it's not, being explicit. The bit about convening. So I think really where Gloucester Community Foundation may want to just explore is people seeing them beyond funders. You know, so we talked about the convening or whatever, so that's not necessarily about funding or whatever. And I think if that is what it is, that is what it is, really. But I think there's sometimes, like all things, dual roles, multiple roles, and at the moment, people.
I'm going to have to cut you short.
Okay, I'll put everything in the chat box. Thank you.
Put some in the chat, and I'm going to go on to the next slide and sum up. But thank you, Bren. All brilliant points, and I'm sure we will all agree. But pop some bullet points in the chat box for us to pick up on. That would be brilliant. Thank you, so we can capture everything. Okay, Sarah, we want to just sum up just by saying thank you so much for your engagement. Sarah pulled out some quotes. You know, we've got to come away feeling slightly more positive. It's a tough chat. There's lots of hopeful things and lots of amazing things going on, but we're also acutely aware of the challenges. So we picked out some quotes that kind of inspired us, really, and made us think about the power of communities. What is it all about? I know quotes don't necessarily change the world, but I'll play we've got a 2-minute tiny video to play once we go through. The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. And I feel in Gloucestershire, the one thing we have is this wonderful, warm connectivity. We do have a real appetite to want to connect, and it's a hugely friendly, wonderful county. So, you know, we do have real compassion and empathy in our county. So we've got everything it takes. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. this all resonates about community and feeling part of community. There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And I guess that's this forum. We're discovering what matters and what connects us. And like Bren says, they're fairly fundamental, simple things that we've just got to keep working on. And one of the marvelous things about community is that it enables us to welcome and help people in a way we couldn't as individuals. And, you know, like I think it was one of you said about people and stigma and not coming out, you know, how do we enable people in our communities to continue to feel part of our communities, that enable us to welcome people and make sure people aren't being left alone. So what we wanted to do is play. It's a very simple thing. We heard this person speak live along with Civic Square, and this is Tom Bloxham. Some of you may already know him, and the core values of him starting his vision of imagining neighborhoods and futures started a very long time ago when he was selling posters and living a life in Manchester. So we're going to just finish off with a clip of his vision and the fact you've got to start with vision and where he's ended up, just as a little bit of an inspirational finishing note. Sarah, if you want to play that for us.
We ought to turn this into a world exposition. Let's create a new Amsterdam. We need parks, green squares, schools. So here we are, back in New Islington, nearly 20 years later. You've heard the talk, but we've now walked the walk. And we've delivered nearly the whole of New Islington. The vision was to try and turn what was one of the worst estates in Manchester into now what's celebrated one of the best places to live in the entire country.
Cardroom Estate, back when we became involved, was notorious. It wasn't the place where people chose to live. People didn't cross Great Ancoat Street because there was a perception, possibly even a reality, that it was unsafe to do so.
We fundamentally believe in the power of people and fundamentally in the power of architecture to make great places.
Our function was to work with local people, many of whom had lived in this neighbourhood for many, many years, to create something which was going to be fit for the future.
We love working with the local community. It was amazing collaborating with them, seeing what they wanted, helping them pick architects, FAT, Demetz, May Architects. We delivered what's this extraordinary new place on the edge of Manchester city centre. Thousands of new homes, new jobs, a park, a clinic, a free school, an amazing place to live and work. I'm incredibly proud of what we've all managed to achieve working together in New Islington, Manchester.
Great Ancoat Street is no longer the barrier that it was in those days, and we really feel now there's a connection here to the city centre.
So he was really inspiring. It looks a bit like gentrification, but it's not. They're not displacing people, and they are regenerating neighbourhoods and areas. When he got to Manchester, Satanic Mills, there's 200 people only living in the centre of Manchester, and one man's vision about neighbourhoods can be realised, and the power that was him was working in partnership with others. And what he's done so well is working with all sectors and being led by the communities. So it is very possible to change places, and that's on a pretty grand scale from coming as a single person with a vision. So it's just coming back to us. We know we're going through challenges in the community, but inspire those demonstrators, because that's how he works and that's how the communities like Civic Space work. There's so much amazing work going on in a county, and we have got to think about how we can share it better, how we can promote it better, and how we can really show the value of what we do. So we'll leave it there, and the next steps, just a couple of things to finish off on. The cost of living programme will stay open. It's a rolling programme, and as we spend, we hope to raise further funds and keep that programme going as further support. The survey and research will come out, so we hope when we send out our surveys, we really want to hit 100 respondees, so we're really hoping you'll all help us with that. Our Invest programme, we've got further funding for next year. If you're not aware of the Invest programme, it's to support charity leaders, and that was something else we were asked for. It's been our third year, hugely successful. A lovely quote from one of our mentees: "I found the support from my mentor invaluable when I found myself in a role that was overwhelming. Without her input, I would not realise this or been able to navigate it." So this is how we're trying to support in ways other than funding, and that is bringing resources together, people who are mentors, who can support, a listening ear, a helping hand, and bringing that resource to support our charity leaders. So these are hopefully some of the other ways that we can be encouraged by anyone who wants to support us in telling us, look, could you do something that we would find of value? And this is what we were asked for, and this is what we've delivered. So we hope with this research, some golden nuggets like this will come out. So further from there, last but not least, please follow our journey. We're hugely active on social media. It is generally just me and Sarah, so you're talking to one of us. But we will always share all of your information as where we can. Tag us in and we will share away. And we're really happy to share all your work. And we really, really do appreciate everything you do to make our county a much richer and stronger county. But by coming together, I'm sure we can do more work. We can build a stronger community, and we will get through these tough times. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hugely appreciate your support for attending and contributing, and we will say goodbye and wish you all a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.